Hey, Stoney here with another game of Mechabellum. So I've been refining my steel ball rate aggro composition, and I've made some very minor adjustments to make this comp even stronger. So if you're interested in playing aggro with steel balls and wraith, this is the game for you. Let's go. At the bottom here, I am playing as a quick supply specialist, and I am up against I Like Napping playing as a aerial specialist. Now, right off the bat here, being a quick supply, I do want to spend the first 400 into getting my very first wraith. If you're not quick supply, then you can always get a single arc light and another chaff of crawler, and that will be just fine because you'll be able to get wraith on the second turn. So let's talk about the startup position. The way I like to have it is to have the crawlers on the line. I will have the steel balls slightly behind the crawlers and leave about a 2-space window between the crawlers and the steel ball. This is especially effective when you're running 2 stone crawlers. This allows your steel balls to essentially dodge all of the missiles. And then for the second pack of steel balls, I like to put them about 4 squares behind the crawler with some crawlers following up the steel ball. So when they do engage, the crawlers behind will get up and do the damage. Now, being quick supply in round 1 is, is a little unfair because of the extra 400. My opponent has 0 chaff clear whatsoever. Now, I Am Napping is a very high level player. I think he's definitely above 2000 MMR. He's being, up there with some of the best taking games. And I think he's mostly a standard player. So this is in his comfort zone. And for me, I am going between aggro and standard. Right now, I'm playing a lot of aggro these days because I'm trying to make flanking, mobile beacon, just a lot of high tempo moves work. All right, so round 1, we noticed that we had a pretty good success, but round 2, you can expect a very hard defense against that. So far, when you're playing Wraith Ball, one of the comp that worked really well against it is Phoenix, Fangs, and Fire Badgers. And if you don't have Fire Badgers, I think Volk can work as well. Because in my comp, it's really just 3 layers, right? In terms of chaff, we have crawlers and also have steel balls. Crawlers will slow down that initial heavy damage and then allows them to move in, and a steel ball kind of draw fire from the wraith, allowing the wraith to ultimately do the damage. So at the end of the day, the steel ball wraith aggro is not about getting really big steel balls to do damage, it's about getting really big wraith to do damage. So for my opponent, he put down 2 squads of phoenixes, and those were primarily for the steel balls. The Stonecrawlers are not getting enough connections in, therefore my chaff, my crawler army, is getting a lot of work done. But because this is the second round, I feel like that Phoenix might just get my Wraith before I can destroy it. So let's see. Oh, mutually assured destruction. All right, round 3, we got reinforcement cards. Speed is really good, but here for round 3, you want to save some money and you want to build another offensive on the other side of the board. This is not something that I've done before. So normally what I do is at round 3, I will get another Wraith and I will put it on the same side, right? So right now, if you see on my side, it's kind of weak, which means I have no chaff clear on the far left, so he can certainly put some more crawlers on the far left. So that's what I used to do before. What I've found that is especially useful is that you can actually take range on the Wraith with another squad of crawlers, and they can absolutely abuse the other side. And also it helps that when you're playing aggro, there's a very good chance that your opponent is going to counter aggro you, right? So this sort of stuff can happen with the Wasp at the front. So having a Wraith on the other side, it denies any sort of counterplay on the far right, and it also pushes into where your opponents are least expecting that second Wraith. Range allows your Wraith to have a much wider coverage, So if you don't have range, you're only looking at about 55 meters. And what happens is that, let's say those crawlers here coming in from the left here, it's going to draw some steel balls over, while your wraith will be focused right there in the middle. Now, because I have range, I was able to clear out those crawlers as well without having to move my wraith. And the final thing about range is that wraith can now comfortably contest phoenixes, which is huge, because before, Phoenix and Wraith will have about, let me just click on a Phoenix real quick. So Phoenix will shoot at a default range of 120 meters. Wraith at its default range will be 55 meters. So without getting range, Phoenix will actually have a 65 meter lead onto the Wraith, which means the moment the Wraith enters the Phoenix firing range, Wraith will have to move another 65 meters in order to fire the first shot onto the Phoenix. And that's a lot of shot that Phoenix can land on this Wraith, potentially killing it. But now, with the range, that distance is shortened to just 25 meters, and that's about 2 seconds of the Wraith moving into the Phoenix, and that's not enough for the Phoenix to kill it. So these are the very minute details in Mechabellum that you need to be aware of when you're playing at the high level. Range, while it may not seem like much, but in terms of this hidden breakpoint of Phoenix versus Wraith, it actually helps the Wraith survivability a ton. All right, let's get back into the game here. Round 4, we have a unit drop. At this point, I don't really need any of these units, so I'm going to pick the Sabertooth and actually selling it. My opponent took the Sledgies. I think it's a good pick because the Sledgies actually help in slowing down these steel balls, and they are very tanky, which means they are going to soak up a lot of damage from this Wraith. My opponent had Wasp last turn, and a very common way to play this sort of game is just to outflank your aggro player, because you know the aggro player is going to pile on into the middle of the board. And to counteract that, a few cheeky missiles will tell you exactly where your opponent's thinking for that round, and the next round you can decide if you want to answer in any meaningful way. Now, you notice that I didn't buy level 1 steel balls right away, but instead I went straight to level 2 steel balls. Why did I go for level 2 steel balls? Well, I need my steel balls in the later rounds to be a super tanky unit. Level 1 steel balls are great, but in this board, where everything is being pretty much killed by my Wraith, my steel ball will have a harder time getting into the battle, staying alive, and earning experience. So getting them at level 2, while a little bit expensive in the beginning, I think is well worth the cost. Because later on, a steel 2 level ball will get armor, and this allows them to get up to steel level 3, which are really unkillable. Alright, great round for my opponent. We're getting some Phoenix onto my Wraiths, and now it's just whether we want to get more Wraiths. Alright, it's going to be a skip here. Advanced defensive tactics is very interesting. It allows your steel ball and your Wraiths to survive quite a lot longer. 30% is nothing to sneeze at. That's a huge jump in terms of HP. Last round, I noticed there were some delays in chaff clear, also some delays in getting rid of the sledgehammer. So I've decided to just complement my board with even more Wraith. And now that I know that there's going to be some sort of counterplay on the far left, I've decided to not add another missile and instead just put a level 1 Wraith. On the other side of the board, I still have the missile, and that is okay. If my opponent decides to jump to the other board, then next turn I will put on another Wraith over there. It's okay to have your Wraith because they move at 12 meters per second, so they're not slow by any means. Alright, my opponent took loose crawler, and those loose crawlers are going to be slightly problematic for my Wraith. But Wraith is one of the best chaff clear units in the game, and it's got 8 meter splash with 4 of his guns. So if you're thinking like Arclight, right? Arclight can shoot a single gun every 0.9 seconds. A Wraith can shoot 4 guns every 1.6 seconds. So it's just a great unit overall if you're running into this aggro position. All right, 4 Wraith, definitely doing a lot of work here. And the steel balls, they're doing all the tanking. So we still got steel balls coming in from the far right. And now we're going to get on tower. Steel balls kept dying, and that's okay. That's exactly what they're supposed to do. And the Wraith are getting the damage and also the experience. At some point, I'm going to want to take 8 gun. That is a very natural progression for the Wraith ball. I'm thinking maybe round 7. Because at round 6, I'm thinking maybe the first tech should be, or the second tech of my board should go to armor. So there's a couple techs in the Wraith ball that you eventually want to take, but you have to take them in the order that makes sense into the board. Rhino is offered, and it's just a huge pile of cash. For my opponent, I think Vulcan makes sense. Having Firebomb on the board makes so much sense. Because I saw the Vulcan, and I realized that the Vulcan can actually make a pretty terrible day out of my game here, I've decided to take armor first. Level 2 steel balls with armor completely negates the damage from the Vulcan. However, the Vulcan is going to get some crawlers, but is not able to take down my steel ball, which means my late arriving crawlers are going to have a great time distracting those phoenixes. Alright, so actually this round I didn't take any deployment, so instead I took armor and I took 8 gun. And it's a huge spike in terms of unit quality on my side of the board. 8 gun, true to its name, you get 8 of the same guns, and what that means is you're able to kill chaff twice as fast, and you're able to DPS twice as much to giant units, because you don't want to really pivot into another unit if you don't have to, especially if you have super jacked and super teched Wraiths, which are really good against everything. One thing that low-level Wraith are bad into are melting points, because it just does not have enough DPS to bring them down, which is why you need help with the steel balls in the early rounds. But as the game progresses and as your Wraith levels, let's say a level 3 Wraith right here, it does 1,360 damage per shot, so that's times 8 times 1.6 seconds. So that's almost 10,000 damage every 1.6 seconds. Alright, we'll get into round 7 here. And this is where a lot of things start to fall apart if your opponent hasn't already correctly answered your BALL-WRAITH aggro. In terms of cards here, I think heavy armor is an excellent card to take. You can drop that either on a Wraith or onto a steel ball. For my opponent, efficient giant manufacturing could be something you might be considering. Melting point is very good into a Wraith. But instead, it's going to be a skip. The Phoenixes themselves already do decent damage into the Wraith, but what he really needs is something to deal with the steel balls. Okay, I was actually anticipating Melting Point, so one of the best unit or the best chaff against Melting Point are actually Wasps. If you're looking at a board like this, right, my opponent doesn't really have any anti-air in terms of the Mustangs. If he does have Mustangs, then my steel balls would just wreck him with the armor. But because he doesn't have Mustangs, Wasp is going to stay alive for so long, allowing my Wraith to actually do this damage. For my opponent, it's going to be chain gun boats. I think the play is to get rid of my steel balls very quickly. Now, unfortunately, a level 2 steel ball with armor actually survive a single shot of chain gun. Alright, 8 gun Wraith coming in. And just look at how much damage the 8 gun Wraith is actually doing. I mean, this one here is contesting a Overlord, which costs 100 supply more. And with that, that is good game. So, Wraith Ball aggro, just to recap, what can we do with Wraith Ball aggro? So here's what I've learned. First round, if you took quick supply with Steel Ball Crawler, then you can just put down the Wraith in round 1 in an asymmetrical position. If you didn't take quick supply, my recommendation is just take Arclight and another squad of Crawler, and then you'll take Wraith on round 2. You're 1 round slower, but you'll end up with more chaff and more deployment. At turn 3, you want to consider of starting up another line of offense on the other side, while keeping your first Wraith over on your original side with your 2 steel balls. All right, so turn 4 and 5, you want to consider getting range first on the Wraith. I think this is absolutely the first tech you should take with Wraith Ball. And then your second tech can either be armor on your steel ball if your opponent runs a lot of small arms fires, a lot of Fangs, a lot of Mustangs, or if your opponent runs like a lot of Scorpions, then you just want to double down on the chaff. So one tech I didn't take is Loose. So Loose works really well into a Arclight heavy, Scorpion heavy board. So that might be something to consider. So that will be your next tech, is either armor or Loose. Depends on the chaff clear of your opponent's side. And then the next tech would be 8 gun. And you just kind of repeat, rinse and repeat, and building steel balls and Wraith and crawlers pretty much for the rest of the game. All the while making sure that your flanks are covered. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on how to play the Wraith Ball Aggro. If you're looking for more games like this, here's another one for you. And I will see you on the next one.
Prepare your tactics. Mechabellum's calling. Deploy your fortress. The battlefield's alive with swarms.